I spoke to House Minority Whip and Louisiana Congressman Steve Scalise. I asked him why he pushed his caucus to vote against the commission.
Yeah, what really you saw were a lot of our members wanted to get to the bottom of all kind of political violence. And clearly January 6th is a day that, everybody who broke the law needs to be held accountable. Hundreds of arrests have already been made, but there were other acts of violence as well. There was a Capitol police officer murdered just a few weeks ago by a far left activist or radical who who ran over two cops. You saw other acts. There were members of our conference who brought amendments just the other day to include other things like the baseball shootings. Why wasn't that going to be looked at? The Democrats voted down every single one of those amendments on a party line vote. So clearly we wanted to expand and look at it. In fact, many Republican senators have said we want to expand it as well. So hopefully that gets fixed in the Senate.
But if so many GOP want piecemeal legislation when it comes to things like infrastructure, why not piecemeal legislation when it comes to transparency of what happened on January 6th? Instead of, you can always do these other investigations later, or you can include them in other commissions. Why not just have an investigation as the bipartisan bill that was presented to the House to vote on? What was wrong with it?
Yeah, well, first of all, there are many investigations, and in fact, there have been hundreds of arrests already.
But that's the criminal.
The authorities are right.
That's a little different. The DOJ, the Department of Justice, is doing a criminal investigation, so they're doing that one. As I understand it, this was basically to look at the cause of what provoked the January 6th one. It's a narrow investigation in light of the fact that this other investigation, DOJ, is ongoing.
Well, and as you said, it was narrow, but there are many members, myself included, that also want to look at all the violence that happened during the summer. Because there were a lot of things that led up to January 6th that aren't being looked at by this commission, that we brought amendments forward to try to expand so that you can look at the whole picture. And Pelosi rejected every one of those on a party line vote. So let's actually look at the whole picture. That's what we brought forward. Those were the ideas that were rejected. Maybe that gets addressed in the Senate.
So what impact will President Trump have on the 22 midterm elections as Republicans try to regain the House?
He cares very much about this country. He wants to help us get the House back. We're very focused on what it's going to take to win the House back. And it's a number of things. One, it's not just stopping bad things from happening, which we're doing, but also putting a really strong alternative agenda. And we've been starting to roll that out. And you're going to see that over the next year, continuing to put ideas out on how to solve real problems on healthcare, to lower costs, protect people with pre-existing conditions versus what the Democrats want to do on this Medicare for all plan, government control of healthcare. You're seeing it on economic issues. We want lower taxes, sane regulations, open businesses back up again, follow the science, open schools back up again. Democrats want to keep things closed. Millions of kids right now are being denied long-term opportunities. They may never recover because Joe Biden sided with the teachers' unions over children. He's trying to give away our intellectual property on the vaccine, for goodness sake, to China. Imagine giving the vaccine. And it's not just the vaccine, it's the entire formula, the intellectual property, giving that away to China. That's a crazy idea.
What impact will it have on the GOP in the House now that Congresswoman Stefanik is number 3 in the House and not Congresswoman Cheney? What difference does it make?
Yeah, I think the real impact is all of us working together to focus on stopping this far left radical agenda that they're moving. When I go around the country, and I travel a lot trying to help us advance our agenda, but also to get the House back, people are concerned about the inflation. They're concerned about getting their kids back in schools. They're concerned about the border crisis. They don't care about these internal battles in Washington. And so we've got to stop fighting amongst ourselves and focus on stopping the radical socialism. That's what we're doing right now.
Coming up, millions of job openings vacant. How do we get people back to work while still providing aid to those who need it? I asked Congressman Scalise after the break. Welcome back to Full Court Press. The economy is struggling to recover after COVID's beating. The good news? Jobless claims are dropping and hitting a new pandemic low. But companies and small businesses still scrambling to fill jobs. Some economists say there is a simple fix: raise wages and pay people more. They argue that for decades, worker compensation has lagged behind soaring corporate profits, and it's time to close the gap. Republicans blame the federal government's enhanced unemployment benefits for the labor shortage. They say it keeps people from searching for jobs. I asked House Minority Whip Congressman Steve Scalise what Congress can do to get more people back to work.
Well, Greta, the first thing that Congress and President Biden can do is stop paying people not to work. There's over 8 million job openings right now. Think about that. Federal government's paying people about $30,000 a year not to work, and there's 8 million job openings. This isn't free money that's sitting in a piggy bank. This is money being borrowed from our children to pay people not to work when every small business is looking for workers. It's absolutely affecting the supply chain.
Is there some, though, sort of problem with trying to match skills with jobs? I mean, some people really can't find jobs. I mean, it's a tough world. It's tough out there. Some people are worried about COVID. Some people have childcare problems. There are lots of reasons people, aren't looking for jobs.
Yeah, and of course, some of those were problems that existed before the pandemic. It's why the federal government sends billions of dollars to the states. And by the way, it's each state that runs their job training programs. The job skill requirements are different state by state, but the federal government's spending billions of dollars on that already. The problem is paying people right now who are staying at home, not going back to work. People that had a job that are sitting at home right now, and their employer wants them back, and they're just not going back because they're being paid not to work.
Former President Bush, a Republican, said just this past week that the reason why there's a border problem is because Congress has failed to act, throwing it right back at both Republicans and Democrats in Congress. Is that fair? Is he right?
I'd love to see us get an agreement on a bipartisan solution long term, but Biden could end this today just by going back to that agreement with Mexico. The Remain in Mexico policy was working. You had Mexico protecting our southern border. And by the way, Mexico is protecting their southern border. It stopped that flow. President Trump had built the wall. Biden right now is paying those companies, paying them not to build the wall instead of protecting our southern border. So Biden could end this today. I'd like to see a long-term agreement.
Have you ever sat down with President Biden?
No, we've reached out. I hope we're able to finally sit down. He's met once now with the Republican leadership, with Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell. I think that ought to be an ongoing thing. It shouldn't be every 120 days where the president sits down with leaders in Congress. When President Trump was in office, we met multiple times in the White House with Republican and Democrat leaders, House and Senate. That's what President Biden needs to get to. He should be doing it on infrastructure. He should be doing it on a lot of fronts.
Well, he has met with a bipartisan group on infrastructure. I mean, we've seen pictures of him meeting with Republicans and Democrats on infrastructure.
Yeah, and I think just like on the COVID bill that had nothing to do with COVID, he had that one meeting and then he turned around and did a partisan bill and threw their ideas out the window. So far in infrastructure, it seems like they're trying to go down that path too, where he holds one meeting with a few Republicans to take some pictures, and then he goes and works with Democrats on a very, very partisan tax increase bill. 75% of that bill has nothing to do with roads and bridges and traditional infrastructure. So work with Republicans and Democrats, like the bill that we put forward. Again, over $400 billion, fully paid for with no new taxes, with bipartisan ideas that can build roads and bridges and broadband and waterways. That's the approach we should be taking. You could get a large vote for that, by the way.